All right, hello everyone and welcome. It is Monday, January 11th. We are back live. We had to took a little break on Thursday due to illness, so I sent out an archive for that particular round, but we are back here live and have a lot to discuss here to start out week two. So today is going to be similar to the next couple of Monday sessions, where we are going to start out discussing all of the new assignments for week two. And then in the second half of class, we will go back and listen to some submissions and review the materials and assignments from week one. So I have 6 different submissions here for the peer review from your fellow students to take a listen to from the week one 2D platformer game composition. So our session this afternoon is going to start out with a new discussion of the week two assignments, but then we will go back and talk about week one. All right, so this is your first round of assignments that has been submitted, and I have gone through and started to go through and grade the different assignments. And I will spend Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday creating all of the grade sheets and feedback for the assignments and deliver that back to you by the end of the day on Wednesday so that you have an opportunity to revise the assignments. Remember, all of the assignments, the game composition, the production technique, and the technical assignment, at least, those assignments you are able to revise and resubmit to improve the grade and the overall quality of the project. So look for those to start coming into your inbox over the next couple of days. And for those that submitted for the peer review, whoops, not that one, it's my other logic session. The ones that submitted for your peer review, we will be going over your 2D platformer game composition and be able to point things out visually and kind of do a maybe a bit more thorough discussion in a video format. So that's generally our progression. That's where we are at so far. Hopefully you've taken the time to download the new assignments for week two. Those are what we are going to get into first here. Let me see. Seems like everybody had success with the first round of assignments. If you had any sort of issues, please reach out and send me an email and we can work through any sort of technical issues that you might have encountered. So it looks like the ball's in my court for the next couple of days while I go through and grade and return all of the grade sheets and the feedback for your first week's assignment. And then on Wednesday, we'll probably discuss the revisions a little bit more in depth because that will be your next task overall. All right, so let's get into the new assignments for week two. You, of course, have a new game composition, a new production technique, and a new technical assignment. But let's go ahead and start out with your new game for this week. Our composition for this week is based off of a game called Angry Bots. This game is also built by Unity Games using their Unity game engine, and it is really built as a demo or a demonstration of their gaming technology to show off what is possible in the graphics and the control. And it's our purpose. There was no strong music system in there, so we set it up so that it is going to accept your music in a particular format. We'll talk about how the music is set up, how the music is going to operate in the game, and what sort of musical approach you should take for this type of game project. So let's see, which direction do we want to start out with here? As with each week, your final purpose, your final submission, that's a better way of saying it, your final submission for each one of these game compositions is going to be a series of WAV files. And so last week, our main focus with 2D Platformer was the idea or approach of intro, main loop, and endings. The music overall was set up into 3 different categories, and those different categories had different or multiple variations, really. You had variations of 3 intro cues. Those were each 2 bars. The main loops made up most of your soundtrack, and that was rotating or varying around between 3 different main loop files. And then at some point, the player loses all of their health points or falls off the edge and loses a life, and there is an ending piece of music that plays. And so intro, looping, and ending is a very common approach for music in games. And the approach that Angry Bots takes is also very common, but certainly different. Each game, with each new game, new week, we have a new approach in how your music is set up and used by the game. So you are going to, the ultimate result of your final submission for this is going to be a series of WAV files. But those WAV files are mainly set up in to function around the concept of ambient music or ambient in action. This is 2 very common approaches to the music and the gameplay in lots of different types of games. Another way of saying ambient in action is exploration and battle, where and this happens in a lot of different types of games, for a large period of time, you're just kind of wandering around, trying to figure out what's going on. You're exploring. At this point, you as the character or the player are probably safe. There's not much danger around, and you're just trying to find the next part of the story. And then action represents the battle or the danger, the action that the player gets into while progressing their way through the game. And a lot of gameplay revolves around these ideas of going back and forth between ambient and action. The music can react to this particular gameplay, and the music that is needed for either an ambient game state or a period of exploration is probably quite different than the music that is needed for a battle or for during action in the game. And so it's all about transitioning, and how do you move between a lower energy ambient gameplay up to a higher energy action gameplay. And we are going to talk about an idea or a concept that is utilized in all sorts of aspects of game development, and that is the idea of a game state. A game state is what is happening in the game at any one time. For every millisecond that flies by while playing the game is constantly determining what's going on, what is the score, how much time is left, how much health do you or the enemy has, have you solved the puzzle, have you defeated the enemy, have you progressed through the level. These are all sorts of things, basically almost an infinite possibility or infinite option of things that can be questioned or determined at any moment in the game. And all of these are kind of encapsulated in the idea of a game state. If something changes, then music or audio can change and trigger in reaction to that. So the idea or concept of ambient is a game state where you are either just sitting there doing nothing, you are exploring around, and no danger is around at that particular period of time, then you would be in an ambient game state. A game state is nothing physical. It's nothing more than just a concept or an idea or a definition of a particular part of the game, where if I am in no danger, if there are no enemies around, then I am currently in an ambient game state. And then at some point, the enemy is going to jump out and attack, and the music needs to shift, the action changes in the game, and you would be currently in an action game state where you have stronger, louder music. The enemy and the player are battling back and forth for a particular amount of time, and then when a couple of things can happen, either the enemy wins and the player is defeated, or more than likely the player wins, the enemy is defeated, then they continue moving on to the through the game, and the game switches back from action back to ambient. And so going from ambient to action or action back to ambient, this is the transitioning back and forth between multiple different game states. And these are the changes that will drive your music system, will drive changes to what music file is being played and what is being heard at any one time. So just like all of our, just like our previous game was based off the idea of intro, main loop, and ending. Those are 3 different game states. This game is driven off of the idea of ambient and action. And so most of our music is going to rely on those different game states, and it's moving between ambient and action that becomes a bit of the challenge here to make smooth transitions as you move through your music. So let me go ahead, and when you download the assignment, you get the PDF. And I'll be explaining a lot of what this says with a description of the game and the music and how it all works together. There's a detailed description of ambient and action, what that means, with different screenshots and images describing each one of the pieces of music, but this is really where I'm getting at. There is an asset list in each one of your assignment PDFs. And that asset list describes all of the files that you will be creating. So by the end of this, you will have a total of 7 files. Notice that the ambient piece of music is over a minute long, while the other action cues are each 8 bars long. There are a set of stinger files, and we'll discuss what that means and what the stingers do for us in our music system. Those are each going to be relatively short, 1 to 3 seconds long. Along with that, you have the specifications of 16-bit 44.1 stereo files. It looks like all of our ambient and action files, these files right here, are all set or need to loop. So we have one main ambient loop that's going to be playing for quite a while, so it needs to be around a minute long. And then 3 different action cues, one for each of the robots represented in the game. There's a buzzer action, or music underscore buzzer action dot wave, music underscore spider action dot wave, and music_mecha_action.wave. And those represent the different robots that you will encounter in the game. So let's take a look at the game itself and how it plays overall. So this game is a much more futuristic style than our game last week. It's a little darker and grittier, and it has robots and explosions. It's maybe not meant for a wide audience, but much more of a specific tailored audience. This game is known as a third-person shooter, mainly because the main purpose is to shoot and destroy the robots that come in and attack. It is third-person because the camera is generally over the shoulder of the the player. Camera is over the shoulder of the character, and you get this kind of above world view of everything, as opposed to looking directly through the character's eyes. So the music for this particular type of game is going to be much more of a modern style, probably much more electronic or synthetic. It can be, will need to be fast and driven at certain points, and anytime these robots come and attack, the action music needs to be loud and strong and full, have lots of instrumentation, full drums and percussion, and probably driving synths and lead lines. Each of the different types of robots will have its own musical theme, so that you know whenever you hear that piece of music that a particular type of robot is attacking. So we have 3 different action cues, which each represent each of those different types of robots. All right, so talking about ambient and action. The main focus of the music system is switching and transitioning back and forth between ambient and action music. So if you just sit here and do nothing, then the game starts out and will remain in an ambient game state. The player just sits there for long periods of time, and there is no enemies around, nobody is battling or fighting at any point, then you will constantly hear that ambient piece of music, that music_ambient loop.wave. Now, that's since it's going to be very present all the way through the soundtrack or through the gameplay, then you want it to be a longer piece of music that develops over time and doesn't just sit in one place. It evolves over the entire minute or more long composition. The ambient music cue or ambient game state in this game does not mean or represent the style or genre of ambient music. When I say ambient cue, I don't mean that it is just going to be in the style of ambient music that might be slower or a long pad or drone or doesn't change or move very much except for over a very long period of time. You want to avoid that approach. The ambient cue in this game does not mean ambient music. It just means less than action. However big or strong or loud the ambient cue is, the action cue just needs to be bigger and louder and stronger than that. So the ambient cue can still have energy and pace and movement to it. It can have drums and a driving bass line and synths and movement and arpeggiators and effects and all sorts of stuff happening and going on in the ambient cue. It can use a pad or a drone or a synth, but it shouldn't just be that. It should have instrumentation in the lower registers, big strong bass lines or bass tones or synths, a bit of percussion. It should have some element of pacing or movement that kind of drives it forward. You don't need a full kick snare drum pattern happening through the ambient cue, but it should have some percussive elements, something that foreshadows what's going to come up in some of the action cues. And drums, bass, and then it should have interesting tones and textures and ideas that move and develop over the course of that minute-long ambient cue. So I like to term this as musical sound design. It is taking your synths and your samplers and your effects processors and doing strange and weird things to them to make up interesting sounds that move and evolve over the course of that ambient cue. So filter sweeps and arpeggiators and delays and multiple instruments kind of weaving in and out. It shouldn't just be one thing. It shouldn't just be one chord or drone. It should be constantly moving and changing over the course of that entire cue. So if the player just sits there and does nothing, then they will be in the ambient game state. Now, when one of these robots attacks, this is the buzzer bot. This is the first robot that you encounter in the game, and it kind of buzzes around or flies around, and there's actually a lightning bolt here. It shoots out. Let's see if I can catch it somewhere right around there. There it is. That is its attack. And excuse me, so the question is, if the game starts with the ambient cue, starts with the ambient loop, and would just loop around and around, how does it know when to go to action? Well, we've already said that action represents the battle. So, well, we know that part, but how does the game itself actually know when the battle has started? How does it know when to change over from ambient to action? And the way it's set up inside of the game, inside of the code somewhere, is whenever either the player loses any health or one of the robots loses health, then it switches to the correct piece of music. So as soon as this player gets zapped by this robot, then the game knows that this robot attacked the player, and so play the action music for this buzzer bot. And then the music will immediately switch over from ambient to action. There is no guarantee when that's going to happen, if it's going to be on bar or beat, if it's going to be in time with the music that is playing from the ambient cue. It is just a hard cut and an immediate change from ambient to action. And it works pretty well because the ambient is at a lower intensity, and then the action music jumps up to a higher intensity very, very quickly because it's just slammed from from the ambient over to the action cue. And we have music here. We're going to take a listen to some demo pieces in just a sec. But now, you'll notice that as soon as the player loses health, the music starts. And you have 8 bars. Your music are 8-bar loops. Your action cues are each 8 bars. There's one for the buzzer bot and one for all 3 of the different robots in the game. Now, how does the music go from action back to ambient? For as long as the battle is going on, your 8-bar buzzer cue will be looping around and around and around. At some point, it has to move from action back down to ambient. So how does the game know when the battle is done and let's switch and go back to the ambient game state? Well, as soon as the robot that did the damage, as soon as it is destroyed, then the music will change and switch back to the ambient game state or the ambient music loop. So you'll see here that the battles are pretty short overall in the game. Boom, starts, buzzer action cue starts playing, gets destroyed. Now, it doesn't immediately switch back, right? Ambient will switch to action. That works really well because it is a higher energy. It's kind of like a jump scare in a movie where the monster jumps out real quick. Your heartbeat skyrockets very, very quickly. It's very easy to go from low and calm up to high and scared or high energy very, very easily and quickly. So we can jump up really nicely, but we can't immediately just drop back down. It doesn't work that way. When the monster immediately goes away and your heart rate doesn't just immediately drop back to normal and you cool down that quick. You have to take some breaths and you have to calm yourself down, and it takes a few moments to move back towards calm. So you can't go from action, which is at a higher intensity, and drop it down to a lower intensity as quickly or easily. So over 3 seconds, as the music will crossfade from action back to ambient. Now, these next robots here are called spider bots, and as soon as they jump awake, right, they're on these little legs here, and they jump up, and they activate, and they start chasing you. As soon as they jump awake, then the music changes. The game knows, there's a spider bot nearby. As soon as it comes to life, I'm going to switch over and hear the spider action music immediately. And then as long as that robot is alive, you will hear that piece of music. Once you destroy that robot, or it destroys itself, or something happens, then then it will slowly fade from ambient back to action. So it can jump up to action immediately, but slowly returns back down because you need a cooldown phase to go from a higher intensity action piece of music to a lower intensity ambient piece of music. The third robot is over here somewhere. When you walk down this hall, there's this large mech robot that attacks. This is maybe a little boss battle that you have to beat him. There's a third piece of music that represents that particular robot whenever it's encountered. I'm going to let this play through one time. I'm going to take a quick pause before we move forward. Okay. So we talk ambient. We've talked action music. Let me talk a bit more specifically on how the action music might work musically or with your choice of instrumentation. So we said the ambient piece of music doesn't necessarily mean, or it really doesn't mean, the genre of ambient music. So it shouldn't be slow or low or boring or just have one big long synth or drone. There needs to be change and development over the course of that ambient cue. With the action cue represents the battles with the robots themselves. It is going to be the biggest and loudest and strongest piece of music that is heard in the game. It needs to sound like a robot's chasing you down with a laser rifle or shooting missiles at you or something, right? It needs to be big and loud and strong and frantic and bombastic, and it needs to give a sense that there is a serious danger happening at that point. So this is going to be your full instrumentation, fastest pace, and strongest instrumentation as a whole. Drums, bass, multiple layers of harmony, and a strong melody that represents each one of the different robots. Excuse me. It really helps if there are consistent elements from the ambient cues to the action cues. So you can use some elements, some instruments that are in both the ambient and the action cue. And it really shouldn't just be a direct copy of, oh, I have a really long chord drone in my ambient, and I'm just going to copy it over into each one of my action. It really shouldn't be an exact copy of any parts, but if there is similar instrumentation from one to the next, then it will help with transition and help make a smooth transition from one cue into the action cue. You can, a double time kind of feel happens and works very, very well to go from ambient to action. So you are not entirely just upping the tempo to some arbitrary value. Going double time or half time on particular instruments works very well to up the overall pace without creating any rhythmic issues when going from one tempo or one pattern to the next. What else? Let's see if we can listen to examples here. This will probably help our direction. We still haven't talked about the last three files that you'll be working with, which are called stingers. And those stingers are going to help transition and help with how smooth the transition is from ambient into the action cues. So let's start here, and we will listen to our ambient cue. And then we'll take a listen to each one of the action cues. With the ambients, notice that they still should be strong levels. It doesn't mean that it's a small or a simple file by any means. Around a minute long, and it should have a beginning and an end that loops seamlessly, because it has the opportunity of just going around and around and playing over and over again. Let's see here. Turn this down. Oops. Now this has a component of like a cymbal drone. There's also some elements that come in and out at different points to create a little bit of change. Later on over here, there is a pretty strong change in the instrumentation. It comes down quite a bit. Watch out for big changes in the instrumentation. It might make it a little bit easier to identify where loops happen. But this is more in the line of what I mean by musical sound design, where it's creating tones and textures that move and develop through the cue to create your ambient. And a seamless loop. Let's jump over here to the three action cues. Here's the buzzer action. Alright, so strong instrumentation, stronger pace, neck cue. Each one of these has their own unique instrumentation, not completely separate instrumentation every single time, but their own individual voice should give you a real strong indication of which robot you are fighting just from the music itself. Alright, drums, bass, lead line. Elements are changing and moving through the cue. Alright, point goes back to the original cue. Or the ambient cue. Let's see. Now, these 3 stinger files over here, these are meant as strong impacts that are going to hide the transition from the main loop, from the ambient cue into action. Let's see here. Alright, they need to have strong hits. They need to hit and get out of the way. Notice these fall to silence. Watch out. If they don't go to silence, they'll just be cut off by the end of the file. You always want to make sure that the files do not cut off your audio. It's good to have everything go to silence, but having this at much extra room is a little bit much. And let's see. Alright, watch out for a stinger that might just be one hit. Some of these can end up sounding just like sound effects. Right? A stinger needs to have a strong impact, hit hard from the front, and then get to silence really quickly. This would be a good element of a stinger, but it really is just a cymbal crash and a kick drum. This one, I think, from earlier. This is a good example because it has the impact and it has other synthetic instruments and effects that change the overall feel of the overall feeling of the sound. Because there's a bit of modulation at the end. Alright, let's listen to another submission here. Let's go with this one. Start out with the ambient loop. Alright, so here we have a lot of energy in the ambient cue. You've got the percussion, you've got the pad. Still needs like a lead line. It's very much focused on the rhythm in the lower registers. But it shows that there still can be a lot of energy and power happening in the ambient cue. That ambient doesn't mean low energy by itself. Watch out for hard loops like that. Everything gets cut off right here. We'll switch over to, let's do buzzer action. Again, good rhythm overall, but really could use a strong lead. A lead melodic line that develops through the cue. You want to make sure that each one of the cues has its own unique melodic voice, its own lead instrument. Some string arpeggios here. And spider action. All right. 8-bar loops. Everything should be seamless from the end of the cue to return back to the front. Maintain a consistent level all the way through. The ambient cues should be at a relatively strong level. These need to loop when it reaches the end. The stingers are going to be set up to hit, but they need to reach 0. If you listen to these don't work so well. Mainly because they're like a little phrase. Watch out for stingers that have any sort of rhythm to them or tonality to them. Anything that can clash with a particular piece of music that they may not layer well with, and then it gets cut off at the end. Listen to this last one; it just stops. So you want to make sure, like these, they are all the way faded out by the time they reach the end of the file. All right. So hopefully this gives a solid overview of Angry Bots and the musical approach and how ambient and action are going to work together. A couple of other things here from the PDF, suggestions for composition. Make sure you match your composition to the genre of the game. The futuristic setting and fast pace of the game requires an over-the-top soundtrack with big modern instrumentation and fast rhythms. One of the main things that we are looking for when we are grading this assignment is the overall aesthetic, the theme. Does the music match the intended response from each one of the music cues? Does your music fit within the style? Does your instrumentation fit within the style? So that it's going to reflect the changes that are happening in the game. The number 2 here, the ambient cue needs to be able to transition to action immediately. Same key, same rhythm, same instrumentation. The instrumentation doesn't have to be exactly the same in both, but certain instrument layers that are, if they are contained in both, will make the transition smooth and will help things move from one to the next. Action will transition back to ambient over 3 seconds after the robot is killed. This should give you a nice smooth crossfade and should allow for enough time for the music to move from one to the next. Pardon me. Number 4, you do not know when any of these cues will be triggered, so watch out for changes in timing between the different cues. Any sort of larger changes in tempo can certainly throw off the overall rhythm and groove as you switch back and forth. And since going over to action is so quick, you want to make it as seamless as possible. All bounce files need to loop seamlessly in order to work correctly in the game. You should probably utilize some of the looping techniques from the week 1 production technique assignment to make your loops as seamless as possible and to make it as invisible as it can be when it loops in the game. Number 6, compose interesting loops. Looping does not mean repetitive. This is something that I get quite a bit when listening to 8-bar loops or 4-bar loops or 16-bar loops or 32-bar loops or whatever, where an 8-bar loop is a 4-bar loop twice, just bounced twice into the file, or it's a 2-bar loop that's bounced 4 times into a file. You don't want to repeat any of your phrasing or any of your melody or really anything from the first 4 bars to the second 4 bars. You should have changes and development all the way through the entire 8 bars, because something like an 8-bar loop is going to loop enough over and over again that it's going to be annoying on its own, much less doubling it by putting 2 4-bar loops within the space of an 8-bar loop. Each bot's action cue should contain instrumentation that can be grouped into percussion, bass, harmony, melody. You are going to make sure that you are utilizing all of these different categories for your composition. Each cue needs to have percussion, bass, harmony, and melody. It's a little bit more difficult to define those in the ambient cue because it can get a little esoteric and weird and sounding with all of the crazy instruments and sounds that you might come up with. To basically define them as percussion, bass, harmony, and melody might be a little far-reaching. So, but with the action cue, you should have pretty well-developed instrumentation for drums, bass, harmony, and especially melody. Melody, along with your instrumentation, is going to provide the voice for each one of the action cues as you build them. Make sure your loops transition fluidly. Make sure the beginning and the end of the cue both match melodically and harmonically. You're not going to sit on the action cue for very long before it moves back towards ambient. So you're going to be constantly waiting for ambient and then switching over to action, and waiting for action and switching back over to ambient, and going back and forth. So you want to make all of it as smooth as possible. And this also includes creating continuous loops. And we're going to be paying attention to that all throughout the month and through each one of your compositions, because it's very necessary for everything that you do. All right. Angry Bots is our game composition for this week. Production library track. Our production library track, or a production technique, is going to be a chiptune composition in the style of 8-bit retro gaming system like the original Nintendo. One of the topics that we hit on this week on Thursday is a bit of the history of audio for video games. We talk about what it was capable from the music and audio of some of the early games, what was possible and what did you hear. Because nowadays, it's certainly not unlimited, but it's really getting there pretty close, where we can get as many different plugins and synths and samples, effects processors load up simultaneously. You can easily have over 100 tracks in a session. We can easily have lots of recorded audio, 24-bit, 96K. Excuse me. So the quality level of the compositions and the technology has certainly hit its stride in the music industry. And so, but there are still some platforms like mobile devices and the internet where you have limitations, and to give you a sense of what it was like in composing for some of these limitations. Excuse me, hold on a sec. Hit a groove here. There we go. To get a sense of what the limitations of some of the early technology was, we are writing a piece of music with the restrictions of some of these early game systems. We're writing a retro chiptune track, and these are utilizing the same restrictions from the original Nintendo, where you're going to have 4 simple waveforms, and a couple of EXS24 sound banks are provided with some classic waveforms from the original Nintendo, and then you're going to compose using the limit of those 4 channels, those 4 sounds, and you're going to have drums, bass, harmony, and melody. We're actually having 4 tracks gives you a combination. You have to have drums in the composition, and you have to have a melody for the purposes of this project. How you use the rest of your tracks is up to you. So that could be drums, bass, harmony, melody. That could be drums, bass, melody, counter melody. That can be drums, harmony, melody, whatever combination that you want of those 4. And you are also required to change your lead sound at some point through the composition, and that means that you don't necessarily have to do a MIDI patch change or something like that. You can create as many tracks as you want, but you can only use 4 of the voices simultaneously. So the assignment describes how this one is set up for you, but I get some pretty good results out of our chiptune composition. I always thought with limited sounds and limited resources that the results might be limited also, and I end up getting some pretty strong results because it kind of strips away at all of the production techniques, although it is a production technique. It strips away at all of the cool sounds and the presets and the really powerful synths or synthesis, and it strips away all of that and gives you very, very basic sounds that you have to really focus heavily on melody and harmony to make it work. So since the sounds don't sound all that great, you can't sit around holding a couple of notes down and it sounding very, very cool for any amount of time. You are probably best served by doing staccato lines or using staccato instrument parts so that you don't sit there and sustain a particular sound for very long. It instead focuses more on the actual composition and performance than the sound of the sounds. So a lot of people have a lot of fun with this one. It is a Logic session that is provided with a couple of EXS24 sound banks to get you started. So download and open up the session and give it a try. And your technical assignment for this week is going to be creating all of the sound effects for last week's game. With each new week, you will be doing the sound design for all of the previous, for the game from the previous week. So 2D platformer here has a total of 18 effects, 18 sound effects that you will be creating and recreating. And the list of them are not all that complex. There's a lot of sounds that you can that are kind of like vocalizations that you can do with some quick voice recording. You can create the sounds on your own from your own sources, or you can download them from any sources on the library. weststarmusic.com has a large sound effects library with some very useful sounds to work into this. So when you open up this assignment, you will find this. Here's the PDF. Hold on a sec. And like some of the other assignments, there are screenshots for each one of the sounds that you will be creating. And there is also a very nice asset list that you should reference to make sure that you are creating all of the sounds that are necessary. Whenever you look over the asset list, I would look for similar types of sounds that you can do as a group. And we have a couple of different bomb sounds here. We have a couple of different enemy deaths. Jump 1, 2, and 3, ouch 1, 2, and 3, and taunt 1, 2, and 3. And a lot of these, like I said, are just vocalizations that you can make on your own rather quickly. Now, what I would do with this particular assignment is I would open up your handy dandy DAW and create a brand new session. Don't close this one, and we're just going to create a new session here. One that looks like this, and we'll just, for now, we'll create one track. And then what I suggest that you do is you go get the game itself and use the original sound effects as a reference for while you are building your new sound effects. So let's do this. Go find the game. You should take a copy of the 2D platformer game that you're building for, and you right-click on it, and you do Show Package Contents. And in Show Package Contents, you're going to find a folder rightfully named Contents. And if you go into Contents, you're going to find Data. And in Data, you're going to find Streaming Assets. And in Streaming Assets, you're going to find two very, very familiar folders called Music and Sound Effects. And you should be able to guess very readily what you are going to put in each one of those. If you haven't already, you can take your music and you can dump your music in here and test it out the next time you load it up and play the game. And you should always do this as you create and finish out any of your music. You should take it into the Streaming Assets folder, place it into music, and the next time you play the game, you will hear your music. But for our sound design, these sound effects are what we are after. So I'm just going to take these, highlight all of these, and I'm going to drag them into the session. And I want to place all the files on one track. Sure, I want to convert them. And I bring in all of my sound effects to check out. So let's listen to a couple of these. And get a sense of what we have here. All right, so starting out, we have bomb explosion. Now, when you import these files into your new sound design Logic session, you don't actually use these sounds. You always want to mute them when you're building everything, and you don't want to get them into your final bounce for your own sound effects. But you should have them in the session, reference them for how long the files are, how loud the files are, what they sound like, if there's any sort of silence or other things that you can identify within the file itself. Next, we have the bomb fuse. Right, so this is when you drop the bomb. it kind of like charges up a little bit. We have, what's that? Bomb pickup. This is just sort of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Nondescript kind of sound. It doesn't have any direct correlation to what a bomb picking up would sound like. Bomb set down.
Bombs away. Bombs away. Bombs away.
Right? That's a voice. You can just do that. You don't have to say exactly what the words say, but something in your own words, something that makes sense. Enemy death, 1, 2, and 3. Right? Those would actually be 3 separate ones. Gunshot. Doesn't sound at all like a bazooka, but it works for their interpretation. So you find your own gunshot when the bazooka is fired. Health pickup. Jump. Let's try that again. 3 jump files. 3 ouches.
Keep it classy.
And then 3 taunts.
Keep it classy. Bring it on. I say, Bean.
All right, so you don't have to say those exact words, but with the taunts, make it family friendly, right? So keep it in the work safe category. But bring these files in, take a listen to them, reference them, follow their settings of how loud and how long the files are, and it will allow you to easily build your own versions. All right. So here, that should wrap up all of our assignments for week 2. Our technical assignment, our production technique, and the game composition. Let's see, we don't need that. We don't need this anymore. So let's go ahead and take some time to listen to the submissions from this week. For our game composition, we have 6 here to take a listen to. And I'm going to take a quick pause before we get into all of this. And we will come back and start out by listening to our first submission. All right, let's go ahead and take some time to take a listen to some of these submissions from week 1. It looks like we have 6 to listen to here. So let's go ahead and we'll start out with the first one here. Keep those muted. All right, I guess we should do an overview of all of them first, just kind of what we're listening for to begin with. Of course, we have our main loops over here to work with. Each of these should be 8 bars long. Looks like we have that. No obvious big gaps in the beginning or end. Strong levels. These look a little bit low, and these down here look a little bit low. And we'll have to take a listen to those to see how it might compare against the rest of the sound effects in the game. But overall, at least just visually, those look to work. Then we have the 3 intro cues. Looks like we're pretty good to go there. Oops. I could just grab them. There we go. 3 intro cues. They do need to build up. These look like they have something added in the second half. These don't look very loud or build. These don't look very loud or seem to build up. There even seems to be a gap at the end. These don't seem very loud and building. So we'll have to take a listen to those. And the endings need to start out strong, but do need to reach silence. So these look like they're set up ready to go. These look like they get cut off. These look quite low overall, but they do reach silence. These reach silence. These look pretty low overall, and these look pretty low. So some of the intros and endings we might have to pay more attention to, but let's go ahead. We're going to start out with just listening to the main loop, and then we'll jump to the intro and ending. Right. Good pace here. Alright, I like the instrumentation. I like the theremin kind of sound as the lead. Got maybe the second half a little too similar to the first half, but definitely works with the instrumentation and the overall groove. Alright, we got a little change to the instrumentation. Let's change to the lead line. Even just going back to the same chord on bar 5 versus bar 1 kind of gives that sense of repetition back here on this one. Alright, let's go ahead and check out main loop 3. Cool. Again, nice changes from one to the next. I like that kind of ghostly instrumentation on each one. The cues are set up to loop nicely. Nice work on those main loops. Let's see that these are set up to build. Or let's try that again. Cool. Alright, there's a little bit of build. Most of it's from the drums. Could use a little bit more from the instrumentation, like this one. We got the drum, the double bass drum in the bottom. Little snare roll there, but the rest of the instrumentation doesn't really feel like it builds much. This one helps a little bit. So could use a little bit more build from the rest of the instrumentation on each one of those intros. Cool. Yeah, you could probably even have it sustained out past in this last beat or so in each one of these cues, and just to give it a little bit longer fade. But they work out as strong endings to the main cues. So that works nicely. I like the instrumentation. I like the pace through the main loop cues. A little bit more from the builds, maybe a little sustained from the endings. Will work out nicely. All right, let's go ahead and start with the second round of main loops here. Main loop 1. Drums, we got progression. I might choose a stronger lead instrument. I like the lead develops over the cue, so that's good. Maybe some change from the chord progression. They're set up to loop nicely, so that works. This sounds a little too different from the previous cue. With that strong kick snare pattern, set lead, and then it switches over here probably best to use similar drums instead of... there's a pattern back there, but it's way, way buried underneath all the rest of the instrumentation. Yeah, each one of these cues sounds a little too different from each other to provide a consistent change as it jumps from one to the next. I would say the strongest one is probably the first one with the drums. Although I kind of like this groove over here, but it's too kind of too much based off the arpeggiator. Watch out for hi-hats or for cymbal crashes that get cut off like that. First one. None of these really feel like they build. They just kind of sit in one space. This almost feels like an ending. And then intro 3 is more obviously set up for main loop 3, intro 2 for main loop 2, intro 1 for main loop 1. But that's not certainly going to be the case, and it's going to jump around even more as it switches. So make sure that each one of your variations is much more continuous. Same thing with the endings. Make sure that the ending, make sure it resolves to that finish instead of just getting cut off by the end. All right, so more consistency from the variations 1, 2, and 3. I would probably say focus on main loop 1 and develop those ideas through main loop 2 and 3, and then make the intros and the endings more consistent in the same way. All right, let's try first main loop here. All right, this feels quite compressed, but really pushed down and level. Oops, what happened there? Are these the same? Oh, no, there's difference. 1 and 2 sounds very, very similar to each other. I need a lot more level in the bounce. Let's go back to the first one here. Works pretty well. We've got the drums, I think, bass line. Yep, bass line's buried back there. Lead line. So watch the compression and watch the overall level. You're going to need a stronger volume off of each one of these cues to compete with the other sounds in the game. Yeah. Main loop 2 needs to be more varied than loop 1. And then main loop 3. Does go to a different chord progression, but the drums are really quite similar. Let's do intro. Feel very what's the word? No, not there. Oh, it's an ending. Hold on. Intro. feels like it switches very heavily there. I hear the drums, and I hear like a white noise filter open as it builds, but it should have some more. This one works a little bit better because there's more from the drums and the lead line. So I just need more of a build from intros 2 and 3, and then the endings. Okay, they should take a little bit longer to resolve. It's one last hit as the ending, but they should be probably a bar worth of drum roll and the melody falling down and the chord progression resolving. They need to land, and they need to take a little bit more time to resolve everything as opposed to just one big sustained hit and fade out. All right, so more level, more dynamic from the drums, and a bit more change from one cue to the next. All right, get into the second half here. Starting out with the first main loop. I like the pace from the drums. I like the instrumentation, the synths and all that. Watch, the arpeggiator seems louder than the sleeve. And they're similar in tone, and the arpeggiator kind of loops and repeats over and over again, and overshadows the lead line, which does vary and change through the 8 bars. A little bit different there, but I still think that lead line should come up a little bit further. Okay, that works. Third variation. Probably need a bit more of a change in the drums and maybe progression. It also feels like things are pretty well straight up and down the middle. You can probably widen out some of the elements. The drums are changing in their progression and pattern. Alright, so good energy, good sounds. Let's see how that builds up in the intros. In the intros. Cool. So the intro, the instruments in the intros are used to build up towards the main loop cues. That works. I might, let's see. Watch out, like in this one, for having no drums in the first half and then introducing them only in the second half. You should use them more consistently throughout. It's really kind of a small point, but helps to keep the sense of building all the way through the cue. Cool. I like all the chord changes in the third intro there. And the 3 ending cues. Cool. Excellent. Let me see the ending, third ending. I like the pace to it, but watch out for kind of doing that double time only in the second only in the one of the endings. Is there no double time? No. Yeah. If you used it in one of the main loops, it might make a little bit more sense. But just to have a little bit of a double time feel through this third ending, it's going to come out of nowhere and not fit. Although having that kind of vibe would kind of work quite well in one of the other cues. So good job on the endings. The intros work well to build all the instrumentation together, and maybe just some more variation through some of the progression and percussion for the main loops. All right. Next one here. Let's go with the main loops. All right. Good start here. Let me make sure the first half and the second half has some variation to it. All right. All right. Very similar. Maybe a slight bit of change, but a much stronger change from the first half of the second half in your first main loop. Let's check out this one over here. Okay, little change. Definitely in the first half and the second half. Even though there's stuff here in the second 4 bars, provides more variation in bars 5 and 7. And then I think the rest of it... Okay, looks like there's a bit more variation through the third one there. I want to check the drums and the harmony. Drums seem very similar. So does the rest of the instrumentation. So just more variation from all the instruments as you move from main loop 1, 2, and 3. That will provide more of a feeling of change. The intros and outros look kind of low in level, especially with how loud this is. These are going to kind of get buried. Should also use all instruments: drums, bass, harmony, melody. Definitely drums through these will help build them up. Probably do the trick there. Let's try the endings. Yeah, you definitely got to watch out for missing instrumentation. There's a very strong change as it goes from one to the next here. Drums, bass. It just sounds like a completely different song, completely different instrumentation. So definitely need some work on the intros and endings to make them more consistent in level and instrumentation going in and out of the main loops. And we'll try one more here. Starting out. Main loop. Oh, looks like there's a space in between these files and space in between the music and the underscore here that might cause some issues when trying to work in the game. Again, watch the low level. drum and the bass line and the lead line are the exact same thing. They follow each other. And there's no harmony. I basically have drums, bass, and a lead line. Yeah. Let's see, are they all like that? Yeah, bass follows the other instruments. Watch the overall levels, and definitely need more instrument layers in each one of these. Watch for the dissonance. Keep it in a particular key. There's no chords, everything is just monophonic played. Let's try these intros here. Oh, they sound like endings, because they are endings. Alright, entering the endings work relative to the rest of the instrumentation. Definitely watch out for the dissonance. Make sure the intros and the endings have the right idea of the build and the resolve, but they're based off of need more instrumentation, more of a progression, more of the melody. The melody and the bass shouldn't follow each other so directly. So there's definitely elements to work on, but the intros and the endings work their way in and out of the main loops. All right, so lots of good things here to listen to, lots of good things to talk about. Gives us a lot of material to go over, and for one of these was yours, gives us things to talk about individually, but for everybody else, gives a solid idea of what works and what doesn't work in the context of the composition. So I think we're going to wrap it up there for this afternoon, and I will be grading all of these over the next couple of days and returning those grade sheets back to you. And then the revision will open up later this week. All right, so have a good afternoon, and I will see you again on Wednesday. Thanks.